See, observe. Good timer. Hello, I'm Camila from Green Apple Books in San Francisco. Thank you for joining us for our event with Shizue Seigel and Kimi Sugioka, celebrating courting a man who doesn't talk. Thank you for joining us in person and online. We're broadcasting from San Francisco. We're on unceded Ohlone land. We hope you join us on our pledge to turn our land acknowledgement into action and donate either your time or monetary means to Indigenous organizations. This is a good time for you to silence your phones and please buy our books. We have both of our authors' books, and it help us continue with events like this. I'm going to introduce our authors. Kimi Sugioka is a mother, educator, songwriter, and poet. She earned an MFA from Naropa University and has published 2 books of poetry. The newest of which is Wild and Wing on Manic Depressed. She has been published in numerous anthologies and is the Poet Laureate of Alameda, California. As an active board member for literary art organizations, she curates and hosts readings in Alameda and San Francisco. She believes that creating community through art is a revolutionary act. Shizue Seigel is a Japanese-American writer, visual artist, and art activist who has supported 500-plus writers and artists of color with workshops, events, and publications since 2015 through her art organizations Right Now. She's a 5-time Nova Boyce Fellow and Jefferson Award winner whose work has been supported by the San Francisco Art Commission and Academy of American Poets. And her debut poetry collection, Courting a Man Who Doesn't Talk, is the reason we're here tonight. So, welcome.
Yay! Okay. Well, thanks for coming. Can you guys hear okay?
Yes, that's great.
All right.
Good. So I think we're going to start off by each reading one poem, and then we will start to, I'm going to have some questions for Shizue about her book and how she came to write it, and then she'll do a bit of a reading, and we'll have some more questions after that, okay? Sort of the format.
Do you want to read one first, or do you want me to read one?
Why don't you go?
Okay. I think we chose sort of autobiographical ones. This is called Paradoxical Heritage. In 1900, at the age of 22, after his father died, my grandfather, a second son, was driven from his home by his stepmother with no inheritance. The family in Hiroshima was 500 yards from ground zero. Had he remained, he would have been incinerated. In Hollister, California, he worked hard to accumulate acreage for his apricot orchards. How proud he was to provide for his family. As you can see in the photograph, all smiling and standing at attention, with their carefully coiffed and permed hair. My uncles and grandfather in handsome suits, my aunts and grandmother in handmade white cotton Sunday dresses, wearing stylish hats fashioned by his daughter, Tomiko. When the family got word that the Japanese would be imprisoned, they were forced to flee. After they shot the dog and burned photographs of family in Japan, after he sold all their land for a pittance, he quietly drank and smoked his life into ash. But all of his children adapted and flourished, hiding their heritage inside an imagined America. After the war ended, my father, the favorite son, had ambitions and didn't want to farm the land, rose to become the chair of his department, became a member of the Royal College of Anesthetists, and met the Queen. His research was cited in Who's Who after enduring endless rejections from racist medical schools. My mother's father, a white Presbyterian minister, helped the Sugioka family settle in Colorado. My father and mother eventually fell in love and married. Married to an Asian man and despised for being an interracial couple, my mother's status as white was vitiated. Was it because she was a woman, or a white woman married to a Japanese man, that made it easier for my friend's father to rape her? The marriage ended with the separation of 3,000 miles between me and my siblings, But without that union, I, my sister, brother, and son would not exist. My cousins, the grandchildren of my Aunt Lily, comfortably ensconced in their California cocoons, Southern California cocoons, angrily protest the wave of migrants attempting to enter the U.S., though their own father was incarcerated and partly raised in the Amache camp. The crisscrossing of lives, migrations through places and times, the wending of convoluted paradoxical paths that cannot be erased or embraced. Thank you.
So I've written quite a bit about my family as well. I'm also third generation Japanese American, and I'll talk more about that during the Q&A. But I'm going to just read a couple of short poems from the book. Nice Girl. I was raised to be the old-fashioned girl, the one that says, "Is this how you're supposed to do it? I'm not sure I know how. You go first." I do it wrong anyway. Nice girls are agreeable. Nice girls are patient. We don't make mistakes or act without permission. Nobody taught us to love the terrible freedom, the wild solitude. We did everything they told us to. Be patient, they said. Compromise, cooperate, wait your turn. Hesitant and yielding, gentle flutter of downcast eyes, inside resentment builds, drop by bitter drop, inside the wild bitch screams. Ethnic adjustments. So that was the girl I was raised to be. This is the woman that I became. Ethnic adjustments. Get this, I'm only going to say it once. I am not, nor have I ever been, a cherry blossom queen. I did not, nor do I plan to bomb Pearl Harbor. I do not, nor will I ever sling a camera around my neck. No, I won't walk on your back or serve green tea. Heck, I don't even like rice. Look closely. I'm not yellow, inside or out. My eyes don't slant, and in case you haven't noticed, I'm not polite. So let's go for a walk, but don't expect me 10 steps behind. In my world, men follow me.
So, do you want to read some more now, or should I ask you about how this book came into being? How did this book come into being?
Okay, well, this book began about 30 years ago as midnight journalings when I was 40-something and working, was a single mom working in corporate advertising downtown. I'd had a single mom, I'd had a few dead relationships, and I'd spent some time licking my wounds, and I was sort of thinking maybe I should get back out there, and I met this guy, and he was a very nice guy, but he didn't talk. And I'd go out with him, we'd have a good time, and I'd ask him questions, and he wouldn't answer the questions. I'd go home, I'd try to get to sleep, and I'd get up in the middle of the night and start writing in my journal, and pretty soon I had this collection of poetry. And over the next 7 years, I did end up, after a year, I actually got the guy to say, "I owe you." After 2 years, I talked him into moving in with me. And then 30 years later, I'm going through my my bottom drawers of writing, and I go, "Oh, look at these poems." And I started to read them, and they made people laugh. So I decided to publish them. But, they're funny in a sense, and some of them are actually kind of angry and bitter, because men can do that sometimes. But then, the underlying truth is that in this society, we're all socialized into certain roles that are not necessarily appropriate. We're all flexible, whole human beings. We all have the capacity to love. But a lot of us get stifled in the communication department. Women are afraid to ask for things, and men have a really hard time expressing those things that are buried deepest within their hearts. So this book is light, but it also has kind of a serious. I like to do the sneak.
It packs a little bit of a punch, I would say.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to read. All right, I have to figure out this timer. I'm going to read about 15 minutes worth of poetry, and then we'll have some Q&A. So this first poem sort of paints a picture of where I was at working in corporate advertising in the Embarcadero Center with this great view of Ferry Building and the Bay Bridge. Tokens and targets. Freshly minted seekers come west and bump the edge of the continent, looking to find themselves, conquer El Dorado, transform the world, but mostly panning for treasures already claimed. Tracing tracks of previous pioneers, expecting new wardrobes to transform them, while their hometown minds tag along, unbidden, morphing their brave new world into something that they can claim as home. The city is progressive by repute, but reality supports rebellion by fits and starts. Radicals iconized caricatures with beards and sandals, tie-dye and patchwork, black leather, slogan shirts that preclude the need to think for oneself. They are looking to find themselves, only to lose themselves in another label. They show colors that would be condemned at home. But even in San Francisco, the color of power is green, and diversity is doled out in tokens. Only 2 Asian Americans on our floor of 30 creatives and 50 suits, jeans on Fridays, tie-dye only on Halloween. Latinos and gays undercover, black faces in security, affirmative action, Chinese, Filipinos, and Mexicans, exiled to purchasing and shipping, double points for immigrants. To wear a yellow face on the 27th floor is an act of courage in a covert war that no one speaks of. What hope of being cherished when simple survival is a daily goal? So, when I got my first job in advertising, it was kind of by mistake. And, up until that point, I had been an impoverished art student. So I had to rush out and get new clothes. So, weekend getaway. I packed away homemade peasant skirts and marked down Pumas, $17 in sky blue and orange. Forsook fabrics a decade ago to dress for success in fashion-forward Clement Street knockoffs, just a touch askew, something lost in translation in Trans-Pacific crossings. Completed the disguise with hints of eyeliner and blush, warm tone neutral lips, waist-length hippie hair chopped off for gel black spikes that declare what my Asian face cannot. Don't tread on me. Mm-hmm. Now I prepare to escape on casual Fridays, haul my weekend getaway to the office in a trail pack. Baggy tees, zip-off pants, Guatemalan hat, sunblock, shades, one-man tent, sleeping bag, boots, bear rope, sanitation shovel, flashlight compass, water bottle, topographic map of Desolation Wilderness. Directions to a BART station pickup point. Everything I need to carpool with strangers and survive whatever the subalpine Sierra throws at me. Thunder, lightning, sudden snow, an unforecasted chance of love. I used to read a lot when I was a kid because I was an Asian person growing up, moving a lot from one white community to another. So I used to hide in my books, out of the pages and into the world. You can live through borrowed imaginings from the comfort of a couch, thrill to adventure in the electronic dark, but actual and virtual don't hold the same risk. Words waft off the page in a drift of petals, a ribbon lock of hair, preserved in the chalice of memory as a golden moment or searing loss. Fragility venerated, sweet-scented secrets swaddled in silk, lurking in the cracks and crazings of porcelain cups passed down the generations. But words aloud? Skitter and plunge like pebbles dislodged by stumbling feet crossing endless scree slope. Don't look down, exposure's too extreme, angle of repose too steep to stop. Fix dulling eyes on a receding horizon till circling thoughts are stilled by exhaustion. Right, left, breathe, right, left, held up by dogged determination and the need to find shelter before afternoon lightning finds you. Real grace rises from real risk. Dive into the world to find yourself. So there were some relationships that didn't work out. Some of them were pretty important. But sometimes love is not enough. Nothing left to say, bags to pack. You give me too much power. I didn't wreck your life, nor did I create it. We shared the same bed, but your dreams changed. I could not save you from demons of your own design. You're like a juggernaut bent for hell. All I can do is get out of the way. And then another guy. Too old for, this guy loved to give piggybacks. Okay. Too old for Oz. I find myself chopping at knees of tin. Dorothy's outgrown the woodman who won't hear his heart. I'm too old to play with straw-filled brains or lions afraid to roar. Too wild for Kansas, where every day is flat. Too many years in storybook land with Technicolor toys. Time to move on to an older tale with lurkings of the grim. Who will meet me in the forest where Toto doesn't go? And yet, as frustrating as all these guys were, there's one thing that I knew even then. Wild rose. Such a gentle bloom, fragile on a slender stalk, befurred by slender spikes. It hides in shadelands by the creek, milky pale against the deeper greens, its moth-like leaves bound less by structure than common inclination, not bred for show or cultivation, or meant for captive vases. A man's heart is a shy bloom. It shrinks from close examination. Oh, wow. So here I am, 40. My kids are getting to be teenagers. Seasoned. They call us cougars now with a touch of derision, or worse. They used to burn us as witches. Crones are supposed to ride broomsticks, not bikes. In ancient lore, big cats were leaders, proud, tough, scarred. We could eat you alive if we cared to. But we only snarl when the soulless encroach. We thrive in the wild. Leave us alone to prowl. Better yet, make us purr. So then, young man in spring, and I did meet him on a camping trip. Threadbare, not frayed, and clean and pressed, clear eyes behind gold rims, hair off the collar. Such an upright young man, he never forgets his handkerchief. Yet in the profile, a hint of the satyr, a trace of the sensual in bow of lip and flare of nostril, classic as marble with a dash of decadence. Then he turns to look at you, earnest and foursquare, such an innocent young man. He so believes in goodness, virtue, truth, jobs well done, but seldom advertised. He smells of libraries and choir lofts, the kind of young man mothers would approve. Robbing the cradle. He has the glow of the much-loved sun, moving easily through life, stranger to hunger and hurt. How can he appreciate what's not been lost? This Eve's shopping for apples, unmarred and delicious. But how to tell he's not mealy inside? So crisp on first inspection. Virtue, truth, good sense. A second look reveals yet more virtue, truth, good sense. Bright and uncomplicated as a new penny. No tarnish on him. But what's to prove he's not another wooden nickel? Carpool. The whirls on his fingertips as he runs his hands across mine. Long, slow, firm strokes over my palms, across the back of my hand, gliding up each knuckle, down the valleys between, caressing veins and tendons and the hollows of my wrists. Such passion in the pressure of knee upon knee. He makes small talk to the driver as his hands make love to mine. Let's see. What is love if not enclosed in the constant embrace of another? Lovers walking down the street, encircled in each other's arms, rib to rib, hip to hip, stopping around the corner for a long kiss and another, pulling each other off balance because they are incomplete and need a crutch. Two halves trying to make a whole. What if real wholeness arises within the self and partners can walk hand in hand, side by side? Is that still love? All right. So, I need to skip to the end. Sorry, I have to leave out some of the drama in the middle of this.
It's okay, you can talk about it.
30 years in. Maybe I'll leave this one until the end. Let me read one of the ones from the middle. Sorry. We upset. We were as wed as surfer to his board. We teamed as one against forces bigger than us both. Together we skimmed glassy, ever-dropping water, riding tightly on the lip, attuned to subtle necessities, ever ready for quick turns. You cambered to the slightest shift of weight, swung out beneath my heels as I leaned into the groove. Then one day you tipped up suddenly and swung straight for my head. Centripetal. I can't seek safety within you. I can only win it for myself. My center spins within me, solid as a gyroscope, whirling on axis. Now your head revolves in widening arcs that threaten to topple you off your base. All I can do is trust that the engine within you will restart and set itself spinning, true again. Girl dreams. Did I misinterpret your silent signals? Misread as love those limpid-eyed moments when you were simply making laundry lists in your head? When I was dreaming in the dark at Saturday matinees, memorizing movie star kisses to practice on my pillow at night. You were rescuing earthworms and tracing rusty tracks of rails leading nowhere. You hewed towards the safety of structure, defined connections as bolts and couplers, every section self-supporting, unentwined and unencumbered, carefully constructed not to reveal what holds it all together. Your tongue, grown stiff from disuse, never learned how to lap and lick and lavish, never learned to babble and breathe the inmost secrets of the heart. Okay.
And there's your timer. Perfect. I wanted to say at the beginning and just sort of spaced it out what an amazing writer and teacher Shizue is. And she has supported, I think, more than 500 writers in the Bay Area with her there were sort of workshops she can talk about later they're all free. She writes grants, she does workshops, she publishes tons of anthologies. Well, 5. They're big, thick anthologies, and these are they're all on themes. And she's just an amazing person, an amazing friend, and I'm so glad that she took the time to write her own book this time, because she has put her own work aside over and over again in order to support the work of others. So, do you want to talk about your childhood a little bit and how it shaped?
Sure. As I said earlier, I'm third generation Japanese American, like Kimi, and my parents, my entire extended family was incarcerated during World War II. My mother's family had a 140-acre produce ranch that they leased in Pismo Beach, right on the ocean, with this fabulous view of Pismo Beach. And she played the self-pity violin my whole life about this lost paradise. And my father's family, on the other hand, ran Skid Row hotels in Stockton. Stockton was one of those towns where if you were a person of color or a poor person, you could not cross a certain line in the middle of town. And Duke Ellington used to come and play at the Stockton Hotel, but he stayed in a Japanese American hotel.
You're safe there.
Yeah, well, they weren't allowed to stay anywhere else. So, anyway, my parents were right at that critical age when they were incarcerated. They were 21 and 22. My mother had just come into some land in San Luis Obispo, Japantown. They lost that in the incarceration. And my father was drafted in the waning year of the war. When they were incarcerated, they used to take points off if you were Buddhist, if you knew the Japanese language, if you were involved in the Japanese American community. My grandfather was actually arrested 3 different times by the FBI, but he had a heart condition. So before the mass incarceration, they would arrest him and they go, okay, you're the treasurer of the Buddhist church, we're going to arrest you. Oh, well, you're the president of the Kendo club, we're going to arrest you. Kendo is a martial art, but he had a heart condition, so they would let him go. So when they incarcerated everybody, they said, oh, okay, well, we're going to have to move you anyway, so we're going to throw you in a Department of Justice camp. And So my father decided that the way to win his father's freedom and prove his loyalty was when he was drafted, by this time they knew the war was going to end, and they all of a sudden go, oh, we're going to need translators that speak Japanese. So my father, that was a good student, so he'd gone to Japanese school and he spoke pretty good Japanese, so he got recruited into military intelligence as a translator, and he stayed in military intelligence for 22 years, and he eventually ended up getting the job as chief of military security for the 8 Western states. And that was the job, the guy who implemented the whole incarceration, his name was Carl Bendetson. My father had Carl Bendetson's job in 20 years after he was incarcerated. But because it was top secret, he didn't even tell me or my mom. I found out about it because he wrote an article for a Japanese American historical magazine I happened to be editing in the 90s, and he said, yeah, I was the chief of military security. Dad, my dad was a very secretive, very remote guy, and a lot of my issues around relationship, I think, had to do with that. Because he was in the military, I moved every 18 months to 2 years. I was born in segregated Baltimore, and then I lived in occupied Japan, back to Baltimore, back to Japan, and then on my grandparents' produce ranch, they sharecropped strawberries for Driscolls for 10 years after they got out of the camps to be able to save enough money to buy 10 acres of their own. So I earned my first dollar picking strawberries on my knees. And I also spent time with my Skid Row relatives. My grandmother was still running that same Skid Row hotel in her 60s. I didn't feel like I belonged to any of these various different environments, but even as I felt judged and rejected by them, I also could see that they were all different and they judged each other too. So I could sort of rise above it in a sense and see both sides and kind of develop my own perspective on things. I think it was not until much later that I saw how many people actually sell themselves out trying to fit into an environment. And for me, it was a hopeless cause, because as soon as I was starting to get it, 18 months or so, I started to get the lay of the land, move again to somewhere completely new. So it's like, hey, I might as well just trust myself, because it's like I'm not making any headway anywhere else. So anyway.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about your background as a poet, your training background?
I don't have any. When I was a kid, I read all the time. That was my haven, I mean, I would, when I was 13 or 14, I'd be having arguments in my head with Dostoevsky. Crime and Punishment is a great book, but the end just drags. Anyway, so by the time I got to college, by the time I got to senior year of high school, it was kind of like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot keep grinding out the A's, I just, so I took an overdose of sleeping pills and ended up in and out of Letterman Hospital, getting shock treatments and Freudian therapy, which means basically if you're not talking to them, they can't do anything with you. So the only thing that I'm grateful for is shock treatments are terrible, but I think the psychoactive drugs that they give you now are worse. So I didn't get those. But I got patched up enough to go to Berkeley for 3 weeks, and I go, I am not going to spend the next 4 years regurgitating received wisdom. I just can't do it. And then it was around the time that this free speech movement started. I go, these guys are egotistical males with too much testosterone, and they're so angry they're not making any sense. I don't need this either. Let's marry the wrong guy and move to the hate just by happenstance, and drop a lot of acid and smoke a lot of pot and discover Ram Dass and go to India and live on an ashram. And then 3 kids later realize the husband that you have is not going to work out and you're going to have to raise these 3 kids on your own. So that's kind of...
But that was your training
Yeah.
as a poet,
right?
I mean, gosh, it's really hard to. Every time you say that you were hospitalized and given shock treatment, I'm just. It's always a shock to me because I never think of Shizue as somebody who needs, some sort of treatment to be sane, to be herself. And I've known her now for several years, so I think my opinion counts. But given that you were raised to be so polite and silent, and you have become such a very strong and forthright person and writer, I'm wondering how did that happen?
There's a number of things. One is I was born and raised in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, which is different from Zen Buddhism. Jodo Shinshu is a folk Buddhism that was started in, I think, around the 1200s in Japan. And basically, the founder of my particular sect was orphaned when he was 10, and he was sent to a monastery. He meditated for 20 years. And then he goes, I'm a failure. I'm going to leave because I can't do this. And I discovered women. And I can't just sit here anymore. So he called himself the stubble-headed fool because he let his tonsure grow out. What he realized, his teacher had said to him that just saying the Buddha's name and trusting yourself to the Buddha would be enough to save you. But his teacher said you have to say it over and over and over again for your whole life. And what Shinran Shonin said was, if you can say it from the most deepest felt part of you, I entrust myself to the Buddha. If you can say that 3 times in your life, then when you die, you'll go to nirvana. So my whole family believed this, and they did entrust in the Buddha. And it's kind of like, to me, the contrast between, it's sort of like the Northern European mindset is very much about control and fear and heaven and hell. And God forbid that you should ever die because you're going to go to hell. And the thing is that the Buddhist way of looking at things is, by definition, as a human being, you are always going to be stuck in the middle, and you're always going to have those choices between good and evil. And if you screw up, oh well, you're human. Forgive yourself and do the right thing. So it's just such a contrast to the burn in hell kind of thing. Okay, so we got 10 minutes. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, but it's all interesting.
Yeah.
I wondered if the audience has questions. I can ask more if you don't, but please, yes, Connie.
I have several questions, but to start with, where do you get your sense of humor? You have a very distinct sense of humor that comes through these poems.
I think, when you don't have any choices and you're stuck with whatever, and as a person of color, you're oftentimes in that powerless position where you don't have any choice except to keep on. And my relatives just had a lot of humor. They had It was one of the ways they just rolled with it. But there's also kind of a sting to my humor. And I think that's partly because the whole thing about Buddhism is self-awareness. You have to be totally honest with yourself. And that includes all of the the ugly parts. And the more aware you are of yourself and your own fallibilities, the more you can see that in other people. You go, oh well, we're all just human. Hey, Okay, so that's where the humor comes from.
Necessity. It sounds like. Anyone else?
What was your time in India like? You said you went to an ashram.
Yeah, I spent 3 months at Satya Sai Baba's ashram at a time, it was 1970, and at that time things were so primitive that I could not find a map of this place. So we went to India not knowing how to find a place, and we said, well, God will lead us there, which he did. But in those days, to travel 125 miles from Bangalore to the ashram in Andhra Pradesh, 120 miles, 6 hours on the bus. And then you get there and it's like totally primitive. We slept in this giant shed with a slate floor with all these other pilgrims, and we drew water out of the well, and we took our little bucket up to Poop Hill and did our business. It was amazing. It was amazing. It just taught me so much about the basics of living. I mean, you can do the same thing backpacking in the Sierras. There's just so much of the distraction of modern life that keeps us from being with ourselves, being with nature, being with what is.
It's true then, still true today. Or more true. Frighteningly so. Anybody else have another question?
Can I ask another one?
Yeah, sure, come.
It was fun listening to your poems and trying to imagine how they looked on the page, so I'm eager to look at the book afterwards. And partly the way you read them, and would you agree that you have a very narrative style? Like, how do you describe your poetry? And it kind of goes to training, like, thank you for answering that question, and you sort of came to it in your own way, which I totally dig and think that is probably how we should all do it. But I just wonder about what tensions you experience in poetry, like, between poetry and prose and narrative, and you're just like, how do you experience the tensions, or do your poems, because the way you read them, it sounds like they kind of like flow like a paragraph almost, and I'm curious about.
I write a lot of prose as well, and I used to not be interested in poetry because I like to tell stories. I like to make observations about life. A lot of poetry, it seems like, is kind of escape, and then some of it sort of escapes into the technical parts of poetry. And I love language, and I like to play with all the, with the sounds and the assonances and dissonances and alliterations and all that stuff. That stuff is in there, but it's not the only reason. It's not the only purpose. I like to have a point. And one of the things I think you could say, it's narrative. My friend Trung Tran, Vietnamese poet, he told me one time, you don't write poetry. You write, what was the word?
Anti-poems.
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 And that stopped me for 3 years. I did not write a single poem. I thought, I can't write blah, blah, blah. And only recently did I look it up. It's a school of thought, a French school of thought. There was a guy who said anti-poems are, they're not the MFA type of poems. They're poems that come from direct experience. So yeah, He didn't mean to insult me
At all. He was actually,
But
a category. Yeah.
right, but it seems to me that as the world is getting more challenging, a lot more poetry is narrative, and a lot more of it has to do with social justice, cultural differences, and all these other things. And those are the things I like to think about. Frankly, the reason that I'm veering more towards poetry is because my prose, it's like I have an unpublished 300-page book about my family's first 80 years in America. And that's fine if you have the time to read it. But a lot of times people just have like 10 minutes in the bathroom. Let me read a poem.
But Shizue's prose is amazing. She's an excellent prose writer. She writes beautiful stories, beautiful nonfiction too.
So nice.
It's really true. I mean, I'm always really impressed by it. So you should check out her prose as well.
Yeah. Well, how are we doing for time? Is it time for us to close up?
It's about 5 to 8.
It's about 5 to 8 right now.
Okay. Do we have time to read one more poem each?
Yes, please do.
Great.
Okay. Jimmy, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'm gonna read a lighter poem. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Oh, I love that first one. It was wonderful.
hit you over the head. Actually, this poem is called "Fanning the Rice," and it's not in this one, but Shizue also does these really sweet little booklets, but they're just one page, and she uses either her art or art from local artists on the front, and then poetry, one poem in the middle. So this is from that.
You can pass them out.
It's called Fanning the Rice. Wash the rice till the water runs clear. Chop 5 ingredients: crab, scallions, avocado, daikon, ginger. Steam the rice, fan it until it shines. There are ways to assemble food: frozen dinners, macaroni and cheese packets, canned chili, and then there are ways to compose: sushi, moussaka, chashu, sukiyaki. Dozens of recipes handed down from mothers and aunts. This is how you fold in egg whites, lightly flour biscuit and pie dough, knead bread, blanch and can peaches, tomatoes, beans, and corn, make masa for tamales, tie them up in husks or leaves. Laborious, day-long commitments to flavor and texture. My aunt, stepmother, mothers of friends all took pride in creations to undeniably prove their love, that we savor in morsels of honey cake, pillows of cream. On my father's 70th birthday, he flew all of his children home and made us tempura. I used to plan and cook elaborate meals of comforting food to prove my love, my worth, my rite of passage. Now I hurry to eat frozen pot pies, eat quickly to quell a quenching hunger, buy cakes and prepared meat, select the simplest recipes when friends come to dinner, muse and write dreams and poems instead of baking cookies and mopping the floor. I admire those who sweat and toil to prefer pavlovas and tarts, and sometimes I feel flawed for refusing to anguish over Epicurean delights, but not enough to stop writing. Thank you.
All right. And I have to say about Kimi, she is absolutely brilliant. She is an amazing poet, and she does so much for the poetry community. She is...
Well, I host readings, yeah.
You do a lot of things, and you go to a lot of readings, especially things that have to do with social justice and things like that.
Yeah, I try to promote emerging writers and often pair them with a more established writer so that we can get an audience.
So she is the curator for
San Francisco International Arts Festival. There's a series called The Last Supper Party. It happens the first Saturday of every month. The next one's going to be amazing with Elmaz Epinader and Mimi Gonzalez, both incredible humans and writers. Yeah, and also Alameda Island Poets Zoom reading I help curate that.
Okay, so I'm going to read one last poem, the last poem in Courting a Man. 30 years in. I love you in spite of yourself, in spite of your privileged ignorance, in spite of blue eyes fading and blonde hair going. Still with head in clouds, foot in mouth, mannishly asserting your rightness even when you're wrong. Born and bred to put a hand out for the handout, but always ready to give a hand. I love you in spite of your need to please absolutely everyone all the time. Just not me, or just me last. You love me because you know deep down I'm the one who sees you truly and truly sees the persistence of your patterns, the depth of your patience, the endearing goodness of your heart. And you love me in spite of myself, in spite of my spite, my biting tongue, my waistline spreading faster than my mind expands. Still an unwilling doormat, hopeless workaholic, automatic caretaker, impetuous adventurer. You love me evenly, even when I'm hot, even when I'm cold, even when I'm a scold, scalding your thick skin and kicking your shins because of what you forget again and again. I love you because you're still the quiet to my storm, the one who truly sees me and sees me truly, my darkest depths, my brightest dreams, the one who cherishes me no matter what. So can you stay where you are for a second? I want to take a picture of the audience and the books. This is such a great store, and you've been such a great audience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you to Green Apple and Cara and Camilla.
Johnson is amazing. Thank you so much,
And
Cara.
Shizue's books are on sale. I brought a few if anyone wants to do cash, Venmo, or PayPal, but no pressure.
And two of my anthologies are also on sale here. Green Apple has supported us for a long time. We really appreciate it. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. You're a great audience. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I think that I'm gonna eventually make my way over to New Eritrea and eat some Eritrean food if anybody wants to join us. But I'll hang around and if anybody's got more questions or whatever. So thank you very much. Yeah, thank
What's the
you.
title of the book again? Courting a Man?
Who doesn't talk?
Courting a Man Who Doesn't Talk?
Yeah.